Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with Carey Wallace. Carey is an author, songwriter, and artist based in Brooklyn. Her new book is titled The Discipline of Inspiration, The Mysterious Encounter with God at the Heart of Creativity. Her previous books include The Blind Contessa's New Machine, The Ghost in the Glass House, Stories of the Saints, and Psalms of Wonder. She's the founder of the Creative Discipline class, which helps people from all walks of life find inspiration and build strong creative habits to sustain a lifetime of creation. You can learn more about all of her work at careywallace.com. So Carey, congratulations on all of your work, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So that was kind of a brief intro. So is there anything else that you want people to know about you?
Oh, I mean, everybody has got a whole world in them beyond what you could put in a paragraph. But I think things that I'd like people to know, I love to make things, but I also love to fix things. So I really enjoy getting spoons from the thrift store and taking off 25 years of tarnish and seeing what's under there. Repairing damaged lace, taking things that people think are not worth anything and making them into something that's beautiful again is something I really enjoy.
Oh, that's cool. So how did you get to here? Can you tell us about, how you became an author and, you
Yeah,
know, obviously you've published several different books and do other work as well.
yeah, I became an author. I mean, I think I have to give that credit to my mother. One of the things that Picasso is credited with saying, I don't think he actually did not say this, but I think it's true enough that it's gone around the world under his name, which is that everyone is an artist as a child, but it's very hard to stay an artist as you grow up. And I believe that's a deep truth, whether or not Picasso actually said it. He said something much more complicated. Um, but my mom was a English teacher and a lover of books, and so she was training me both to be a reader and encouraging me to be a writer from a very young
Wow.
age. So I know a lot of people who have different stories where they were struggling with family expectations that wanted them to be something very different than creative, or thought that that was not something that should be a life's calling. It should be some kind of a sideshow to your central task of making your way in the world. And I had parents who really thought that that was something worth doing. And
Mm.
I know you're an engineer. I come from a family of engineers, but also musicians.
Ah,
And so when I started to write, there were not a heck of a lot of fiction writers in the family, but there were people who had devoted life to an artistic craft. And their idea was, of course, you will practice. So, which is actually not what people tell writers. Like even when you go to like high-end writing schools, they actually do not necessarily talk to you very much about the practice of writing. They're going to talk to you about the craft and the mechanics but like, how do you actually get those words on the page day after day? And I had a huge clue to that, which was from the music world, you just spend the time every day, no matter what the day is. And that proved to be an extremely powerful tool in my life as an artist, and it is why I wrote this book because I could see the
mm.
power of that, and I learned so much from like having that discipline from a very young age.
So did you ever read Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird?
I did, yes, she's wonderful.
Right. So, she's a big advocate of, shitty first draft and practice and
Exactly. Yep.
butt, butt in the seat,
Yep. Exactly. Time spent. Time spent.
So, yeah, I can appreciate, and the title of your book is The Discipline of Inspiration, right? It's not just about inspiration, it's the discipline of inspiration. So, crossing two topics that sometimes people will separate.
Yes. Well, and I think actually they don't even just separate them, they put them at war with each other, right? So there's a lot of people, inspiration really has quite a bad name. Like to the extent that we praise it, it's kind of woo-woo. Like, I was inspired to, we talk about it as the kernel of an idea. But oftentimes we're talking about it as being, I say this in the book, like you can get inspiration from a faux place or the correct real estate buy, or, you can be inspired to win a football game. It's a very hazy word in the way that we use it. And discipline commands a lot more respect from most people. A lot of people are like, the inspiration's worthless unless you have the discipline. But because I had the discipline, it was clear to me that the discipline is also worthless without the inspiration. Like if you are sitting there, you are waiting for something to come. And I think that that is especially clear for a writer who is literally dealing with a blank page, right?
Mhm.
So it might not be as clear to a musician that they are playing without inspiration because somebody has told them what notes to hit and they can kind of pretend to themselves that they're doing a good job by hitting those notes. But I think that the performances that really transform us are the ones that have this third element, without which a writer does not know what to put on a page. And a musician, even with all the right notes, does not really know how to play. So I see them as really equally important. And I think that the one that you can't do anything without is inspiration.
Hmm.
So.
Well, before we talk more about your new book, can you tell us just a little bit about the previous books?
Yeah, so the first book that I wrote that came out from a big publisher was called The Blind Contessa's New Machine. It was published by Penguin, and it is the story of the invention of the typewriter, which was invented by an Italian count for a blind woman so that she could write him letters. And this happened in the
Huh.
Italian countryside in the 18th century. And and what I was really interested in there was there's sort of a romance quadrangle that happens. But what I was really interested in was that as this woman goes blind, she discovers she can still see in her dreams. And so she develops this incredibly vivid dreaming life as she loses the sighted world. And then I went on to write several books for young people. I think young people are really the best readers. Like when I look at books that I read when I was young, I realize how much I brought to them because
Yeah.
so little is actually on the page when you go back looking for it. It was all what you brought as a child. And I really love writing for that audience. So I wrote a book called The Ghost in the Glass House. Which came out from Clarion. And that is a book about a 12-year-old girl who falls in love with the ghost of a boy who can't remember who he was before he died. And that
Oh,
happens in this sort of seaside town and, among the children of the landed gentry. And it's an interesting little book. And then I wrote two books that are sort of like overtly religious books. Although the first one, Stories of the Saints, did not come out from a religious publisher. So it came out from what was at the time the largest independent publisher in the country, Workman. And it is a collection of stories of the Christian saints for kids. And it starts with Polycarp, and it moves in order, in chronological order, through church history, telling the stories of, telling, its own story of the church through the lives of some of its most
hmm.
interesting characters, all the way up to Mother Teresa. And
Hmm.
that book was illustrated by a gentleman named Nick Thornborough, who is also a video game designer for BioWare.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so the illustrations are extraordinary and kids love them, and that was a really fun book. And that was followed by Psalms of Wonder, which was a collection of segments from the Psalms for kids. There's about 30 of them, and they're all beautifully illustrated by a young Vietnamese woman named Qua Ly. And the idea was to write poems that would be very memorable and captivating for kids, but also stay very close to the original language so that when they encounter those psalms as adults, they will sort of light up as something that they also heard and recognized as children.
Very cool. Wow, that's quite a eclectic set of things
Yeah,
that you then, which is really impressive.
yeah. One of the things that I think holds them all together, from the stories of of a woman who has lost her sight to the stories of the saints, is I'm always interested in what we can't see and how
Mm.
it affects what we do see. And I think that
Mm.
that thread runs through all of those stories and everything else that I'll probably do. So,
Interesting. Interesting. Well, let's talk about the new book. As I said, the title is The Discipline of Inspiration, The Mysterious Encounter with God at the Heart of Creativity. And this is particularly relevant to the Find Your Next Calling, platform that I established. How did this book come about? How did you decide to write about this?
uh, so I started writing this book because after my first book came out, had always been somebody who really loved the work of other creatives, like always wanted to see more of it, and was already working on programs that would help people make more stuff that were very simple and very, to some degree, ad hoc and yet persistent. So, for instance, our family has a lake house, a small little one bedroom that didn't even have plumbing when my mother was growing up, but it's a house in a beautiful little lake in Michigan. And so I had been inviting artists for years to come out and spend their time making art on the lake. And I realized that that was a really wonderful experience for them, but that they were going home and struggling to continue to create. And so I got interested in the idea of helping people figure out how to wear the groove of a habit of creation into their daily lives. And I know you also do work with social justice, and I see this as really a justice issue because the vast majority of funding for the arts is geared at taking people outside of their daily lives, um, outside of their, you know, the context of the people who need them, outside often of jobs that they only have 2 weeks of vacation in, but to take this residency, they have to leave for 6 weeks. There's only certain kinds of people who can do this, right?
Sure, sure.
But if you can give everybody the habit of creation, then maybe we can hear from different voices, a larger number of different voices than we are currently hearing from. So I started this program. I thought that I needed a curriculum for it, and I wanted the curriculum to be of speech by artists on art. And I was curious about what people have said about that across history and across genres. And what I found was people saying all kinds of different things. And about basically every topic that you could imagine. They disagreed on the purpose of art and the definition of art and the life of an artist and like what kind of person should be an artist. But the one place that they really eerily all agreed was the moment of inspiration.
Hmm.
And they saw that moment as being something that came from beyond them, that had a personality distinct from their own, that might actually go to somebody else if they didn't accept it. And and that took them places that sometimes they actively didn't want to go and helped them to do things that they couldn't really take credit for
Hmm.
and things beyond what they would have ever dreamed that they could do. And I got very, very interested in that agreement among all these artists who disagreed about everything else. And I got also very interested because I am a Christian believer. I got very interested in the fact that almost all these people used religious language and reached for religious language to describe it. So some people very overtly said, this is from God. God is giving me these ideas. And they said this from different religious backgrounds, right? But they also sometimes would say, it feels like God, but it couldn't possibly be God. But they still had to reference something divine in that denial. Well, what happens if we just believe this idea that it comes from God? Like, where does that take us? And I think it takes us some very interesting places, which is what I try to describe in the book.
Wow, wow. Well, as we were talking before, I did a lot of work with Frederick Buechner, who, talked a lot about, his own inspiration and, where he, got a lot of his, insights and ultimately writing from. And it was very much that.
Mhm. Yeah,
But anyway, you have several interesting and profound statements in your book. So I'm going to ask you to speak about a few of them, if you
sure.
would. Right at the beginning of the book, you say, we must treat the word inspiration almost as much as the word love. So you touched on this a moment ago, but how do we mistreat the word inspiration?
Well, I think we put it to work in way too many contexts. And I think we're never sure what we mean by it. So I think that we are stretching it and asking it to do things that and not supporting it with any real thought, right, about what it means. I think we do really similar things with love. They're both words that we use all the time. And they're words that people can use to each other and mean completely different things, right? So I would like to see that, like, I think a little bit more precision actually in both of those cases would serve us and the words well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what can you add a little bit of depth in terms of what you mean by inspiration?
Yeah, so the conclusion that I came to is that it's that inspiration, um, I think is best defined along with two other things, which are talent and technique. And I think they are the three fundamental ingredients of art. And talent is just how easy it is for you to sing in tune or draw a face that looks like the person that you're trying to draw. And technique is the time that you spend in training, like the time you spend running scales, the time that you spend, painting a canvas, the skill that can be earned. And inspiration is the thing that lights both of those things up and transforms them into art. And without them, even really stunning displays of talent and technique don't really amount to much. And we have all like heard the yowling guitar solo that just leaves us cold, even though the person is incredibly talented, right? And then sometimes somebody who's just picking out, who has listened to a melody that they didn't know before they heard it and has picked out just the simplest little guitar line will bring us to tears because I think it is genuinely inspired, even though it's
Mhm.
not a display of talent or technique. So I define inspiration as that moment when something breaks in and tells us to do something we didn't expect to do, and that is leading us to create something in the world that wasn't there before. And I think that it's that word is used very widely. It's used, I say in the book, it's used, about faux places and football games, but it's largely used in the context of artistic achievement. And I actually think that the use in faux places in football games, although it is lazy and thoughtless usually, is also appropriate because I think that that element of inspiration is available to us everywhere. And that when we listen for it, anything that we do can be raised to an art form.
Amen. Yep. Yep. So here's another statement from the book. Uh, I'm someone whose life has been saved by art again and again. That was you speaking in the book.
Yeah.
Can you share why you say that?
Yeah, I think I'm not alone in this, which is part of why I wrote the book. I think there's actually like a much wider group of people who this is true of than would admit to it. But I'm somebody I'm somebody who has found companionship in songs and in books when I felt alone. And I'm somebody who has felt like I found a reason to live in those things at moments when it felt like otherwise it might have been easier not to. And I also feel like art has shown me ways to live that were better than the ways that I had before I came in contact with that art. So I think in all those ways it has saved my life. And I think that many people, if they thought hard about it, would discover that they have in big or small ways that that is also true of them.
Mhm. Well, again, I think Buechner would agree with that based on my readings of his work. So here's another statement that I really like. The search of inspiration is a species of prayer.
Yeah. So one of the things I do in the book is wonder, how do we get more inspiration, right? If it's the core of our all art, then as an artist, I greedily wanted to know how do I get more of it? And the conclusion that I came to is that the gesture that we're making in inspiration is to get out of the way of something that is not us, like a spirit beyond ourselves. And when I started thinking about that, I was like, virtually nothing in modern life teaches us how to do it. It's all about like trying harder and clenching more and thinking and you know control, basically methods of control in modern life. And so I was like, what can you do to get better at surrender? It's such a weird question. And but what I realized was that in my spiritual life, the spiritual disciplines that I had practiced, which appear across religions and throughout time, things like fasting and prayer and poverty, silence, solitude, pilgrimage, that all of those things were also designed to get you out of the way so that a spirit bigger than yourself could enter, could find a place in the world through you. And so I started to think that the sum of human wisdom on how to surrender is found in those spiritual disciplines. And I think one of the most fundamental ones is prayer. And I think that, this sort of TV version of prayer is like, oh God, please, if you'll do this, I'll never do that again. Right?
Right.
Which everyone, including you, knows is a lie, even as you're saying it. But I think that the saner form of prayer, and to be clear, I think that all speech to God is sane. Like any honest speech devoted to God is sane, and is some of the only sane things that we can do if we believe or if we even suspect that there is a God. And and I think it is actually important to like pour our hearts out to God and share things with God that we believe God already knows, right? There's something about the relationship there that is more important than whatever we think the theologies are. But um, but I do think that the most interesting thing, if there is a God, is to listen to God. And I think that that is the most important species of prayer is the listening. And I think that when we are searching for inspiration, we are searching for exactly that encounter with God that the mystic and the believer is also searching for in prayer.
Well, I love one of the things that you said a moment ago was these were all practices that were designed to get yourself out of the way.
Yep, amen. Amen.
You know, that's pretty telling,
Yeah.
especially for an engineer like me.
Well, we need engineers. You guys make the cars not crash and the bridges stand up. So I have nothing but respect for engineers.
So here's one more statement that I really liked. The foundational element in an artist's relationship with God is love.
Yeah, and I think this is really important. So these ideas, I hope to some degree are actually very much a new entry into the conversation in this space. But to some degree, they echo conversations that have been going on, since before the time of Christ about the idea of the muse who gives us art, right? And sometimes that's a human, sometimes that's our girlfriend, right, who's somehow giving us the art. But there's a lot of work on the usefulness of the muse. Elizabeth Gilbert has a really interesting book on why she chooses to think about the muse as giving her her work. And it does a number of things for artists. It takes the pressure off of them because it also makes it, because it's not coming from them, their own limited resources, but they've got some bigger source. It also gets rid of the idea that like I said this thing. If you're saying something that like might be unpopular, it could be like, oh, the muse told me to say that. I don't think that, but the muse told me, to say this. So it has some interesting outcomes, but I also think that the idea of an unmoored muse is a dangerous idea. And I think that, we don't know who the muse is or what it wants from us. And we don't know, is it willing to kill us in the service of our art? Sometimes it feels that way, right? And sometimes people legitimately do things that are really genuinely self-destructive in what they think is the pursuit of this muse or the pursuit of the creation of their art. And so I think that it's very important that the like shift that this book does to root inspiration in a God who has a character and a history and even a human family that can be known and that you can be part of is actually incredibly important. And I think the most important part of that is that if you have a God with a personality, that God can love you and you can create out of love for both God and the world and the people in it. And you can be sustained by a love from beyond this world where the love is always imperfect. And I think that that gives us a kind of strength that the sort of unmoored, hazy definition of the muse can never give us.
That's beautiful. That's very beautiful. So since I don't really consider myself an artist, I was really glad when I got to the chapter in your book that's titled "Everyone is an Artist, Everything is Art,"
Yeah.
because I think what you say about art in the book and what you say about inspiration in the book is really universally applicable beyond what people consider to be typically considered to be art.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I'm kind of sad, Brian, that you read the whole book and you don't consider yourself an artist still.
No, I'm not there. Sorry.
But I would really strongly make that argument that I believe that I do believe in a God who created us and created us all individually and created us in God's image. And I believe that the most fundamental thing we know about God, actually, even before we get the idea that God loves us, we get the idea that God makes things, right? And so I think that perhaps one of the most fundamental things about being human is our creativity. And I think you see that actually in this world where there's so much AI and so many of the things we thought we were valuable at, like being an engineer or like writing papers or, suddenly machines seem like they can do this better than we can. But actually what the machines cannot do, the thing that only humans can do is make something that's genuinely new out of nothing, right? Which is
Yes.
a quality of God. It's a quality of God. So, and we could argue for a long time about whether humans are really creating something new out of nothing, but they're doing it much more than these machines, which require literally millions of pages of plagiarism to do what they're doing.
Yep.
So, but I would really strongly make the argument that every single one of us is an artist, by which I mean every single one of us in whatever we are doing can listen to that voice of inspiration and follow it and put something new in the recipe or plant something new in the garden or like come up with a more creative way to like make or sell that product, which may actually make it more of a blessing to the world. So
I'll buy that. So I'd like to read from one of the endorsements for the book. This is from Area D. Matthews, who says, whether you're an artist or seeking a deeper understanding of the creative impulse, the discipline of inspiration wondrously unlocks the power of everyday inspiration, gratitude, and beauty. So can you give us like your elevator pitch for the book? How do we unlock inspiration?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to, I don't mean to correct you, but her name is actually pronounced Era, like Taylor Swift's Eras Tours.
Ah, sorry.
She is a wonderful poet, and she has a book out called Bread and Circus, which you guys should all run out and get as well, along with this one. Um, the elevator pitch for this book is uh, that sensation of inspiration, that sensation that when we are touching something, when we are confronting or creating art, we are touching something beyond ourselves, is not an illusion. It is a glimpse of the reality that God is present in the creation of art and God is present in our experiences of art. And that means that anybody can be an artist when they welcome that inspiration, and also anything can be raised to the level of art. So that's the
Nice, nice.
kernel of it for me.
So here's another one. How would you like readers to be inspired by the book? Since we're talking about inspiration, how would you like them to be inspired by the book about inspiration?
Well, I'd like them to be inspired to not shut down the things that they feel inspired to do when they feel them. And I think when people don't feel like they're artists, and we've done a really good job in Western culture of being like only certain very special people are artists, and mostly we know you're an artist because you made a lot of money doing it, which many of the artists we respect most now, like Walt Whitman and Vincent van Gogh, made zero money, right? Like the people who persist the most were not measured by, by money in their lifetimes. Uh, but I, it's funny, I wrote a ghost story that we talked about at the beginning, and when I went around telling people that I actually do believe in ghosts, all these people who you would never guess have ghost stories, all these others seemingly very buttoned down, no nonsense people would tell you the craziest ghost stories. And when you go around saying like everybody has inspiration, everybody everybody has it in them to be an artist, people come and they tell you about the music that they hear before they get out of bed that they've never heard before, that they don't know how to sing or even write down. They talk to you about like the books that they've had ideas for all their lives, that they've been like writing, more chapters and more book in their heads. And they also we asked, I just got married, and for our wedding, we did this dangerous thing, which we said, if you want to give us something handmade or something that you or somebody else made that's wonderful, please give this to us. And one of my friend's husbands gave us a fossil that he had like taken out of the ground and cleaned up himself, like a 36,000-year-old fossil.
Oh
And he was
my.
like, this is a piece of art. Like, and I was like, you fully understood the assignment. You fully
Wow.
understood it. Like you understood that like the act that you did in pulling that out was all art. Like lots of people might not define that as art, but I fully define that as art. So I would hope that what people do when they read this book is listen to themselves and listen to what I believe is the voice of God more and take the tiniest steps or the biggest steps towards actually acting on that inspiration and just see what happens.
Go for it.
Yep, absolutely.
Go for it.
Absolutely.
So I know you're in the midst of, launching this new book, but is there anything you can talk about in terms of the future, whether it's books or other projects?
Um, I actually don't. I appreciate the question. I am. thinking about a follow-on to the Saints and Psalms book, but that is not solid yet. And I'm also thinking about my next fiction project. So I haven't written fiction in a while, and I'm really looking forward to getting back into that. But I have not. There's a book about a train robber, and there's a book about a haunted theater. So I'll just say that you guys can vote afterwards about which one I should.
Good, good. Well, thank you again for writing this book. It was an important book to me. And, I can't say that about all the different books that I read. And I think
That,
it's very insightful,
thank you.
and it can be very helpful to a wide variety of readers, not just people that paint or write or, in other forms of art, so to speak.
That's wonderful. Well, and it means an especially large amount from somebody who has immersed himself as fully as you have in Buechner and many other wonderful writers.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, again, everyone, the book is The Discipline of Inspiration, The Mysterious Encounter with God at the Heart of Creativity. And Carey's website is CareyWallace, CareyWallace.com. So Carey, thank you again, and thanks for doing this work.
Oh, thank you so much for spending your time with me, Brian. I really appreciate it.